I had pretty much like growing up like zero influence as far as like no parental supervision at all, right? Already a Generation X latchkey kid. So that kind of really shaped a lot of kind of where I went. Very poor. Mother was trying to make it what she had and then battling with her own issues and demons. We lived from place to place, was always in a different school, lived in homeless shelters for some time also. Teenage years is kind of where I kind of went off track, I think what most kids do. You know? Got pretty hardened young, you know, as far as a lot of fights. You know, trying to figure myself out, still upset, you know, why am I in this situation?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like trying to figure out life, you know. When I originally went in, like, so this was pre 9/11. Talking to the recruiter, you know, give me all these different options. I was like, at that point, I was like, MP, that's the only time I'm gonna see any action, like anything going on. It should be somewhat gonna give me some kind of adrenaline, right?
Okay.
You know, so that was my
You're looking for the thrill.
I was looking for the thrill, right? I actually signed it in my unit September 11th of 2000.
Oh, wow.
1 year before the towers. So yeah, so did the Q course, went to 7th Group, and at that point we're at Fort Bragg, and then deployed quite a little bit.
Obviously, multiple combat tours as a Green Beret, and I know that you went, you know, from just a 18 Bravo weapons sergeant up to being a first sergeant and sergeant major, right?
Yes.
So every level of leadership within the Special Forces structure you basically have done from an enlisted point of view.
I get a phone call. My son was in a motorcycle accident. And then, man, I was just like, at that point, like something was, you know what I mean? Like I knew.
You knew.
Like at that point, man, my like stomach just dropped, you know? And so from there, you know, I tell my wife, you know, it was, you know, my son ended up passing away, right? So it was the most, obviously, the difficult thing that I've ever had to deal with, that we've ever had to deal with in our life, you know. Everything just started kind of unraveling, you know what I mean? Like, I went away from, like, the PT, like, all, you know, you're going through this grieving process, and you don't know how to do it, right? So for 20-plus years, even as a childhood, I've learned how to, like, ignore trauma.
Stuff it down.
Stuff it down, right? Because that's what a man does. You just stuff it down, put it aside, you carry on, and you move forward, right? Draw a fire, move forward, right? And then, like, now you're like, now, what do I do, right? Where do I go from here? So, yeah, I mean, at that point, we just went to pretty, very dark place. And I think a lot of SF guys, too, it's control.
You want to be in control?
Yeah, so, like, so what the problem is like, so it feels uncomfortable to give Christ control and say, all right, I'm going to give you control, right? And I don't know what that looks like. It's a very scary thing. After I went all in, and I'm like, listen, like, this is, if you can give me peace, man, that's the thing I'm missing, you know?
Welcome back to the Present Fathers Podcast. My guest in this episode is Terry Wilson Jr. Terry, welcome. How are you, man?
Doing good. Doing good.
I'm looking forward to this one. Well, you reached out to me, actually. I'm very honored to have you on, and kind of really one of the first opportunities for you to share your story at length. So with that, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience so we can get to know Terry a little bit?
Yeah. So Terry, we have 4 kids. Been married since we're like 20 years old, right? So 24 years of service as in the military, and I mean,
here you are.
The start of it.
Yeah, you just retired.
Right? Yeah, just retired. Yep, retired
2 months ago.
Yeah, in June, and then trying to get into this this digital space.
That's right.
That's foreign to me, I guess. Yeah.
Well, so you know, Terry, you're a husband and father. 24 years, most of it as a Green Beret.
Yep.
Lots of deployments. How many total deployments?
The deployments. So for the first 20 years, the first 20 years of my time in service, I was gone for probably almost 11 years of our marriage.
Wow.
Right. So yeah, it came out to like 10 years, 7 months.
Wow.
That was deployments, TDYs. Like I'm adding quite a little bit of it.
Sure.
You know, some of it was a lot of it was self-inflicted. You know, volunteered for a majority of it.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? So, but yeah, so it was a lot. So.
All right. Well, certainly have a lot of experience with combat deployments, building teams, leadership. But what we're going to get into as well is where I think a lot of people don't understand is you're just a guy too, right? You're just a man too, and you're a father, a husband, trying to be the best of those things. And now that you've kind of started a new chapter of your life, this is something a lot of people can relate to, not just people getting out of the military, but any man kind of turning a new page. So with that, let's kind of walk through your story a little bit, because I think it's going to help guys listening to this really understand how to overcome their own challenges in life. And so I guess start kind of from the beginning. I know you had a pretty rough upbringing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the military, I think there's kind of two different people that come in the military, usually either low income, you know what I mean, or like middle up, you know what I mean, people that are patriots too also come in there. For me, so you either come in the military because you love the country, right? I think a lot of times, or you don't have any other options.
Yeah.
Like, the military is your option. You know what I mean? So for me, like, the military was my get out of jail card.
Okay.
Like, you know what I mean? So my upbringing was pretty rough, you know. My mother, you know, battled with addiction, you know. Then my father, you know, there was issues there. Father wasn't around. So I had pretty much, like, growing up, like, zero influence as far as, like, I did there's no parental supervision at all, right? So, I mean, you can imagine a kid, like, kind of growing up, already a Generation X, latchkey kid, you know what I mean? So that kind of really shaped a lot of kind of where I went, you know?
Yeah.
And then very poor, you know, mother was trying to make it, you know, with what she had, you know, and then battling with her own issues and demons, you know?
Right.
And then, so we lived from place to place, was always in a different school quite a little bit. You know, lived in homeless shelters for some time also, you know. Wow. So, you know, I think probably, you know, I think growing up most of the time, I think probably the teenage years is kind of where I kind of went off track. I think what most kids do, you know. And at that point, that's where, you know, got pretty hardened young, you know, as far as a lot of fights. You know, trying to figure myself out, still upset, you know, why am I in this situation?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, trying to figure out life, you know. So, you know, and I met my wife, I was probably, I think we were like 16 years old.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 15, 16 years old, matter, you know. I was living with my grandmother at that time, and then met her at the bus stop.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So
you were just hopping on the bus and saw her?
Yeah, hop on the bus, saw her. We met her from school, a bus stop, because I moved from one school to the next and met her there. So that was kind of how we met. But
was it like love at first sight, or just?
So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, just like kids, you know, teenage kids.
Yeah.
I mean, well, preteen. I would think I was maybe middle school at that point. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I probably was maybe 14, 15 years old, actually. I think about it, you know. But then even through there, you know, I still had a lot of aggression, you know, still a lot of fights. And then, and.
Do you have any trouble with the law as well?
Yeah, I had some trouble with the law. I kind of went through that thing.
Okay.
You know, I had like 3 felonies before I was old enough to drive.
Wow.
Yeah. So I won't get into the details of all that stuff and those fights, but that was just kind of how I.
Right.
You know, I looked up to, at that point, you know, you don't have any father figure, a father figure there at that point. You know, as much as kind of, and you're rebelling against everything. Right. You
just
know,
angry and everything
else. The guys you're looking up to are the guys that are, you know, the bad guy in the movie. Like, right? You're not looking up to, like, the guy who's, like, you know what I mean? So that's where my whole, like, purpose was. Like, hey, this is where
you idolize, like, power.
Yes. So that was what I thought was masculinity.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, the violence, the anger, like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, growing up, like, that's what you kind of think it was, you know? And truthfully, the person that really brought me out of that was my wife.
Okay.
Right. You know, and then, you know, so I dropped out of school, got my GED, and then I was working, just 9-to-5 jobs, man.
Okay.
And then, trying to figure that out. And then I was trying to kind of go clean, you know, kind of get out of that lifestyle.
Right.
For my wife, you know. You know, I got her, she was pregnant before we were married, right? And then, so we get married, and, you know, I'm back and forth from jobs, and then it just we weren't cutting it. We bought our first house when we were 18.
Okay.
Which is a great like accomplishment.
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna say that's a lot earlier than I did.
The house was like the house was a shithole.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was nothing to kind of it was good for us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a shack. You know, but it was somewhere to live. So I was very grateful for it. You know, and have an opportunity to do that and provide. So that was great. And then from there, you know, I'm like, man, like I have to do more. You know, like this is not. I don't want my kids to go through this. You know?
Yeah.
So I pulled myself out of that, and I'm like, military is the way for me to kind of get out of that.
Okay.
You know.
Did you like research around, or you were just like straight, I'm going to go in the Army, or kind of like what was that thought process?
Man, so like really truthfully, before then, like I always my grandfather was in the military. He was Vietnam vet. My grandfather was World War II. He jumped in.
Okay.
You know. So I have a lot of people that was in there that was either in the military, was in the Army, right? And then my uncle was in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
Like, you know what I mean? So like I had a lot of background in my family who's been in there. You know?
All right.
So I'm like, hey, I think Army's where I was going to go. So that was where I was leaning towards. So. But like I didn't know nothing about like being a Green Beret or any of that.
Right.
I didn't know what a Green Beret, a Ranger, or a supply clerk was. I didn't know the difference before I joined the military. I had no clue.
I just want to be a soldier. And
I just want to be a soldier. Yeah.
So like, what did you actually enlist as?
So I actually enlisted as I don't even remember what the MOS was, but it was an MP when I originally.
Oh, so
came
it wasn't infantry. Okay.
No, it wasn't infantry at all. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And so you joined the Army. Obviously, your family probably uproots with you now because you're active duty and all that kind of stuff, which in a lot of ways I think was probably a really good thing, right? Because you were able to kind of...
Yes. For our situation, I think that was perfect.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because at some point, you know, I seen soldiers who try to stay close to home, trying to get out of a certain lifestyle, right? And it makes it more difficult.
Right. It's like you almost need to cut ties.
Yeah, you need to cut ties, you know? Some people can do it without that, but I think most people need to totally cut ties and put 100%.
So in a lot of ways, it was actually a blessing to your family.
To me, I think it was a blessing, you know.
And, okay, well, that's cool. That's kind of you don't hear that too often, I guess. But so where then, kind of like, how did your career start going? And then obviously you became a Green Beret at some point pretty early because most of your career was spent there. So, like, how did you start from just getting started to learning what it was and kind of meeting the mark?
Yeah, so when I originally went in, like, so this was pre 9/11,
right?
When I went in, right? And like
BDUs and black boots. And
BDUs, black boots, right? And then so like, you know, you're talking to the recruiter, and then we go to the the MEP station and trying to like figure out, okay, hey, what's your job? Like, you know how that is, right?
Yeah,
you know? So you know, give me all these different options, and for me, I'm like, this was pre 9/11. Infantry was on there, and I'm like, man, all you're gonna do is clean the weapons. Like, I'm not gonna, because I'm still this kid, trying to like get after it, right?
Yeah, you want to go do
like,
something.
Yeah. So I'm like, where else can I do that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, they offered me underwater welding, and I was like, man, that's a lot of money. You know what I mean? I'm like, maybe I probably could have took that, but I was like, at that point, I was like, MP. That's the only time I'm gonna see any action, like anything going on. It's gonna be somewhat gonna give me some kind of adrenaline. Right?
Okay.
You know, so that was my...
You were looking for the thrill.
I was looking for the thrill, right? So this is pre 9/11, so I'm like, okay, let's go that route. You
Gotcha.
know? And then I was there. I actually signed it in my unit September 11th of 2000.
Oh, wow.
1 year before the towers, right? As soon as the towers hit, they deployed us over to Qatar, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, right after there. But like, you're not doing nothing over there.
Yeah, you guys were just being security, right?
Yeah, being security, right? So going there, we deployed to Qatar for like almost 11 months, 10, 11 months. And then come back, and then end up going back and then going to Iraq. And we were assigned to, we had an ODA, like we were assigned to over there.
Okay.
Right?
And you were like augmenting them?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we were just like pretty much just security. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Like, you know what I mean? Not even just security. Like, we were just there for hired help. Hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z, right?
Okay.
So anyway, so we're there and we're assigned with them, and I'm seeing these dudes like running and gunning, and I'm like, all right,
what is that?
Yeah. Because like right now, like, you know, we're really not, even though we're in Iraq, we're not really seeing any. I'm not seeing really any combat.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not really seeing any action or anything like that. And I'm like, at that point, you're a young kid, and you're like, that's what you think you want
because
to
you're
do.
like what, 22, 21 at this point?
Yeah, young. So maybe 22, maybe
okay.
that's one, maybe 20, yeah. So like. So like that's what I'm looking at. I'm like, man, I can do more. you know?
Right.
And at that point, that's where I'm like, all right, I got back from that trip, and then boom, I went to selection.
Just went and found a recruiter and
Yep.
or got it all teed up.
Yep.
Were you, like everything just first time go type of deal, or like?
Yeah, I was a first time go on everything, but there was selection, like everything. So I was a first time go on everything, but on selection, when I was at selection at SFAS.
Yeah.
So the way the Q course works is, well, obviously it changes over the years, right?
Sure.
Right, but the STAR course at that point, it was if you did 5 points on your first night, you don't have to get the other ones.
Okay.
Right?
Gotcha.
So if you got all points on the first night.
Performance incentive.
Yeah, it's a performance incentive for that on that one, right? But if you didn't, then you had to get so many points on the next.
Okay.
You had to get a total of, I can't remember what it was. You know what I mean? I think it was 12 or something like that. I don't
Okay.
know. So the first night, I boloed.
You didn't find any?
No, I found like maybe 1 or 2 points.
Oh, wow.
So it was to a point to where on the next 2 nights, I had to find 5 out of 5.
Wow.
I could not have any errors.
Yeah.
On the next 2 nights, right? So I'm like back against the wall.
Right.
On this one, right? You know? And at this point, like my wife was at home at selection. She was pregnant with our youngest son, Caden, right? And I'm like, man, I'm not going back a failure. You know what I mean? And she was going to deliver. Like, she delivered. This was in October, and she was delivering. She delivered in November, right? So this was at the end of October. Like, I'm sitting there, like, trying to decide if I don't make this, am I going to go home or I'm just going to stay here and redo this again, right? Am I going to go home and see the birth of my child?
Yeah.
Or am I stay here? Because I'm like, I'm not going to be a failure. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, like, so I'm down to the last 2 days. The next day, come in there and crush it.
Nice.
Boom, like that, like done, right? So all 5 points. The third day I go out and I get all 4 points, but my last point is a long click movement, and it is like 12 clicks away, and I have like less than 60 minutes to get there.
Oh man.
Like, and if everybody's moved through the woods, like
You don't.
in North Carolina for you know, in McCall, like, bro,
You're not moving fast.
is a very hard, you know. So, man, I dumped all water that I had left and dead reckoned and just ran for like 60 minutes. And then I got to an attack point. Once I got to my attack point, I'm like, okay, hey, this is how far I am. And then went to the point. And I was down. So I did my dead reckoning there. And then I did like, you know, a recon. Okay, so I got here. Okay, then I did a clover method to figure out exactly, hey, where my point should be at.
Yeah.
And so as I'm doing that, you know, like I'm sweating, like I'm, you know, it is shitty, you know, I'm like feeling like, man, I failed, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, man, it's like second, it's like down, it's like 60 seconds.
The panic is setting in.
The panic is like really setting in. Like, I'm just like, oh man, I'm screwed, you know? And then like I'm over there, and I hear something, and it was the tailgate, guys getting the tailgate of the truck. And I look over, and there's my point. Bro, and I'm just like,
wow.
I just get there, and I'm like giving my scores card, you know what I mean? And the instructor's like, bro, you just barely made it.
Wow.
Get on the truck, you're good.
Nice.
And I'm like, you know what I mean? I'm like, so, yeah, exactly. I'm like, and the rest of that, rest of that.
Just a real quick follow up. So you were married for these first deployments, right? Qatar and Iraq.
Yep.
You know, and then I assume you had a conversation with your wife, like, hey, I want to go do this. What was that like?
Man, I'm gonna tell you, my wife has supported me on any and every endeavor that I've ever done.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? Like, she has been by my side and my back the whole time. You know what I mean? Like, she's an amazing woman. So
that's amazing to hear.
Yeah,
and you know that having a strong marriage and having a supportive wife turns a good man great. You know, it gives you such wind in your sails to just be better on all fronts.
Yeah,
and you know, I know you're kind of getting in the same place of wanting to help men improve their lives, and that's what I found is fixing's not even the wrong term. Helping men lead effectively in their own marriage so that their wife can be that way more, to be fully feminine.
So this is
it's such a powerful experience, and it solves so much else in life.
Yeah. So like we have this as men, we do this to ourselves a lot, right? We look at this. What does success look like?
Yeah.
What is my purpose? What does success look like? Mm-hmm. So people look for purpose outside of their marriage and outside of their faith.
Right.
And they look for success outside of their marriage, outside of their faith. Mm-hmm. You're setting yourself up for failure, right? So if you can, and the thing about it is you look at it and you're like, okay, I want to make, what does success look like? If I make X amount of money, is that successful?
Right.
If I make this, you know what I mean? If I achieve this and this, if that's successful, right? So let's just put out an arbitrary number there. Let's just say if I make $10 million, I'm successful.
Mm-hmm.
But if you leave your family behind and you do not focus on them and not see like they're part of the success, and then you break up your family and you give them half and you have five, I mean, even not even thinking that.
Yeah.
Why not just, you know, obviously there's going to be times in your life where things are not going to be even, right?
Sure.
This is not like this great, like, you know what I mean?
Balance is impossible.
Balance is very, very difficult to have, you know? But if you put your family and your faith, like, first, right, then you don't need to make that, you know what I mean? Let's make a little bit less, you know what I mean?
Right.
Keep it all and keep my family
It's a
together.
long-term investment.
Right, it's a long-term investment, you know? And like we talk about, you know, you get a guy that got there as a businessman or whatever, he's, you know, CEO, and then, you know, he's making, you know, millions and millions of dollars and focusing all of his time on that, and then goes through 3 different divorces and they take half of his shit every time.
Yeah.
I'm like, how successful are you? I mean, you could have just stayed with one marriage, picked a good woman,
Yep.
you know what I mean, and kept all your money.
Yeah. I think.
And made half of that and worked half as hard.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? The thought process, though, but as men, I think we're just like that competitive drive.
Right.
More and more and more is not always the best way to look at it.
Exactly.
You
Well,
know?
how much of that competitive drive and effort are you putting into your marriage?
Exactly.
You know?
Right. Yeah. So.
I think we get led into this lie that we just take it for granted.
Yeah.
But so back to the point of your wife, clearly she has been a massive support for you to do all of the things you've done.
Oh, yeah.
And overcome any of the things you've done. And I just really wanted to call that out because, you know, I think marriage is kind of under attack today, or at least it's not looked at in the way that it needs to be. And, you know, I think younger guys especially, they're afraid to get married nowadays because there is a lot of baggage about it, right? Like to your point of getting divorced and you lose your stuff. But when you find the right woman and you cultivate that relationship well, you will accomplish more than you ever thought you could because of her love and support, right? And that's something that only a woman can do, right? That's their superpower is they help you become something greater. So I'm just, it fills my heart to hear that about your wife. Yeah. And I just wanted to touch on that too, because for all the men out there, like maybe you do want to do something big and kind of scary or whatever, and that's good because you should want to have a higher purpose and accomplish things in life. But checking in with your wife and making sure that she can be along for the ride is a very important step. And it sounds like she was game with what you wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can understand it nowadays where I think on both sides, like marriage is a scary thing right now.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of trust. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? I think there's a lot of false perception of what a masculine man is and what a feminine woman is.
Right.
Right. And then, so there's a big issue. I think, you know, I talked to my daughter and my son about it. You know, it's like, hey, listen, you choosing a spouse is the most important decision you're going to make, you know? And my advice to my kids are, do you love that person at their worst?
It's good.
If you love them at their worst, then that's the person you want to marry.
Right.
Right? Because somebody at their best, that can be just a facade. That is just right. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like
life is going to happen.
Life is going to happen, right? And there's going to be you know, and this is the thing about it. There was a version of me that my wife had to deal with that she did not love.
Yeah.
And she stayed with me. Right. There's a version of my wife that she had to go through that was not the version that when we started, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to deal through that to get through generations of marriage. Right. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the reality of it, right? So, you know, but we get in this honeymoon phase, like, oh, I love this person. Right. And men don't, they think logically on everything else except on choosing a spouse. And I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, you have to, you're using all emotions, right? And thinking with the wrong heads. That's right. When you choosing a spouse. Yeah, think with the one on your shoulders. And not logic, you know. Yeah. And it will cost you everything. It will, definitely. Yep. It is the most important choice you can make. And so, you know, you should be very discerning about it on the front end. And we'll get to that later, too. I do want to get to that. So you make it through. You earn your Green Beret. Yep. 7th group right away? Yep. Or, so originally when I went on there, I picked, because 7th group wasn't in the fight yet at that point. Gotcha. Right? Okay. And I originally...
This is like, what, 2004 time frame?
Yeah, this is around 2004 time frame.
Okay.
Yeah, 2004, 2005 time frame. And 7th group wasn't in the fight yet. It was 5th and 3rd.
Okay.
And then, but they ended up sending me 7th group. And once I got to 7th group, they were like all in. 7th group was running and gunning.
Gotcha.
There, you know?
Okay.
So yeah, so did the Q course, went to 7th group, and at that point we're at Fort Bragg. So
right.
Yeah, so we went over there and spent all of our time there at Bragg, and then deployed quite a little bit.
Yeah.
Over there.
Okay. So we don't need to go into like all the gory details, but you know, obviously multiple combat tours as a Green Beret, and I know that you went, you know, from just a 18 Bravo weapons sergeant up to being a first sergeant and sergeant major, right?
Yes.
So you kind of every level of leadership within the Special Forces structure you basically have done from an enlisted point of view. And so, you know, I just want to be respectful of like your experiences and not draw out things you don't want to talk about. But really for the audience, you know, talk about, I guess, at a high level, overall what your experience was like and some of the things you learned that you think are universal to all men, not just as a warrior.
So I would say a couple things we kind of hit up a little bit there is the wisdom you draw after living for a certain, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you know, like being knowledgeable about something and having wisdom on it comes from failure and learning like what I thought was right or what I thought I did was good, but I didn't see the overall bigger picture.
Right.
Right. You know, we talked about that, like purpose.
Yeah.
Like if your purpose is in whatever career field that you're in, you're setting yourself up for failure. Right.
Like your identity as a man.
My identity as a man cannot be a Green Beret because you're not going to be a Green Beret forever.
Right.
Your identity cannot be I'm a CEO because your identity is not going to be forever. Right. Like you're going to come out of that position. Right?
Definitely.
And now you have an identity crisis because you're like, well, I'm not that person anymore. Right?
Yeah. So
you're surrounding everything that you do into an identity that it's not going to stay with you forever.
Right.
Right. So you're setting yourself up for failure. No, I don't care what career field you're in.
Yeah.
You know. So that's one thing.
Did you struggle with that?
So I'm a kind of person, like I go all in on things, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of 18 series do that. Even just SOCOM in general, I think.
Yeah.
Because like you want to succeed, right? And it comes to a point of an obsession on a lot of things, right? So like you're obsessed with this, right? I love being on a team. Like I love the team life. Yeah. Like I love the camaraderie, the brotherhood, like the leadership, the combat, like man, I loved everything about it, you know? And and there's a lot of things that was great about it, you know? But a lot of times when you put everything into something, right, you're successful at it, but everything that you're successful in, you're saying no to something else.
Right. That's right.
So, like...
It's a trade-off.
It's a trade-off, right? Yeah. So, like, you have to realize, like, okay, you have to... When you get old and you wisdom and you're like, okay, these are my barriers.
Right.
I can do this very, very well, but these are my boundaries because my number one priority, you know, is my family. My wife, you know what I mean? Like, so there's a huge trade-off and a sacrifice whenever... No matter what you're doing, whether you're a CEO or whatever, right? Because that's where we just talked about a failure as a man a lot of times is we put all of this into... one basket, you know, and there's certain times to be successful in life, you may have to do that for a season, a season or two, right? The problem is when's enough, right? And when in the mindset of can I task some of these tasks out to somebody else once I get in leadership positions? Yeah. Once I grind it out for however many years, 5, 10, however long that takes, right? When do I get to task that out and have the mindset of I'm going to pay somebody else to do it so it frees up my time so I can be with my family and have my purpose. Exactly. This is the reason I worked hard for this amount of time. Yeah. You know what I mean? I did this for this amount of time so I can now have my time back with my family. Right. Because my perspective, like, changed, right? And understanding, like, your time is your most valuable resource. Yeah. Like, you have to understand. Once you understand that, your life will change.
So speaking of time, you spent a lot of time away. Yep. And you'd even alluded to earlier that you volunteered for some of this. Yep. Did your wife at any point be like, hey, look, man, enough's enough?
So,
I would assume there's some ups and downs along the way.
Yeah, so there's ups and downs along the way, you know. And then I will say, you know, that's one thing that I've always said is my wife has always got a seat. Like, she's always got a seat at the table, and she's always like, hey, listen, but she's never given me like an ultimatum.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is this is a great point. That's actually a very feminine way to, for a wife to come to a husband and like, instead of it's this or that, right?
Yeah.
That's actually very masculine.
Yep.
But to lay it out more in a more of a feminine way, like, honey, this bothers me and this bothers me, and is very concerned. Sounds like maybe she took that approach.
Yeah, she did. She did take that approach.
Which again is just another testament to how amazing she is.
Amazing she is. And then, but then at the end of the day, like there too, I'm so, somewhat obsessed with that.
Right.
There is some times where I'm like, where she was like, came to me with actual concerns. And at that time, I don't think I was good enough I wasn't knowledgeable or wasn't enough as a man. It's not whether I didn't have the empathy, but it's very easy as a man to say, I'm doing this for you.
Mm. Okay, yeah, you kind of hid behind like the false idealism of it, right?
I'm doing this for you.
It sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Right.
Like, you want all this stuff, you know what I mean? Like, this is...
Yeah, I get it.
Right? So, like, at any time as a man, sometimes we fall behind this, like, oh, but I'm doing this for you.
Exactly.
No, I'm doing it for myself.
Yeah.
Right?
Actually, a great quote, he was a guest on the show, said, it was like, you can't sacrifice your family on the altar of success.
Yes. Yep.
And too many of us do that.
Oh.
It's kind of like the American culture.
Yes,
it's actually to do that, and it needs to stop.
Yeah. So, you know what I mean. So that I think I failed on that a little bit. You know? But towards the end of my career, I did some other. And I'm like, she came to me, hey, listen. I'm like, all right, let's come up with an extra strategy. You know what I mean? And this was kind of before we pulled out of Afghanistan, but I'm like getting close to my 20-year mark.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And I'm like 18 years or so.
Right.
I'm like, all right, let's come up with an extra strategy on getting out of here.
Okay.
Because we had some really, I had some tough deployments.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We did a bunch of, I won't get into details, but, Helmand, like all, you know what I mean? Like Musa Calais, like, we were down there multiple trips, so we had some pretty rough trips. You know? So that played a big toll on, I think, changing my perspective on things, good and bad. Yeah. And then, my family took a big blunt of that, me dealing with that stuff,
Yeah.
And then you deploy from one trip to the next.
But they're still dealing with it.
Yeah, right? And not only that, though, is you leave a lot of that baggage. Like, you go on a trip, and you're like, and you haven't resolved things, right? Then, you come back for 6 months or so, then you deploy again.
Right.
Right. And all this stuff just compounds and compounds and compounds. You know what I mean? And then you get to retirement, and then it's an explosion.
Yeah.
So.
You had alluded to me also that, like, you were looking for the thrill. You were, like, constantly looking for the next rush. And so although, many of the experiences were painful, you still, like, kind of liked it in a way, right? Like, you're still kind of looking for the next one.
Yeah. So, like, there's two ways of like looking at it. I think a lot of it's good and bad. You know what I mean? I kind of been on. You're like I engulf myself in that warrior mindset.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, part of it, I think, is a coping mechanism.
What do you think? Let's define the warrior mindset from your point of view.
So from my point of view in combat, right? It is like I want to get in a fight. You know what I mean? Like it's an honor to be here. This is what we do. This is
very Spartan,
right?
Like,
very Spartanist kind of thought process. Now, even my guys will tell you, like, I always was a tactician, right? And I looked at things the smart way.
Right.
Right? Like, so I never went into, like...
You're not being a cowboy.
No.
Yeah.
No. Like, your life is more important than mine, right?
Yes.
Like, we're here to get after it, but we are going to be tactically sound, right?
Yep.
There's a smart way to do things, and there is not a smart way to do things, right? And, like, when I say I'm a warrior mindset, it was not bravado. Right?
Right.
If we weren't equipped to handle that operation or whatever, then we're not equipped to handle it.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's training or equipment or whatever, right?
Right.
And we're going to find a different way to do it, which is technically and tactically sound, where we have the advantage, and we're going to take it to the enemy and have zero, least amount of casualties, right?
So what are some of those, like, tangible things? Is it stoicism? Is it like, what are the kind of factors that makes an effective Green Beret in combat?
So I think, right, you have to, well, obviously you have to have stoicism. You have to be able to control your emotions, right? That's huge. I think that you have to have empathy. You have to have humility to be effective. I think the biggest superpower anybody can have, and this is what I tell my kids, is being self-aware. Right?
I agree. I like that one.
If my kids came up with nothing else but they were self-aware, you can change it.
Right.
If
yeah,
I'm
you know where to fix things.
I know where to fix things. Now you choose whether you're going to fix it or not.
Right.
Right. But like being self-aware is like I think the biggest trait that anybody can be successful in any career field.
Yeah.
But being a GB, you know, I've counseled guys before, and I'm like, hey, listen, as a team SAR and as a company SAR major, like, hey, listen, this is where you're at, this is where you're excelling at, this is where you're having issues, you know? And then there's some guys, you look at them, they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, bro.
They're kind of drinking their own Kool-Aid too much.
Yeah. You know, ego, like you can't fit their head through the door. It's just so big, right?
Right.
And I'm like, listen, man, I'm like, on paper, you are the man, like you're the shit, right? But I'm like, you always leave early, you're not helping your teammate out, right? You know what I mean? Like I don't care that you're the best shooter, you're the fastest, like you're the strongest or whatever. You're not the team player that you think that you are. You know? No. And I'm like, listen, ask your teammates. You know what I mean? And then I brought the guys in there, and I'm like, hey, listen, I counseled everybody, and some of these guys are going to come to you and talk to you. I'm asking you to be honest, right? Because if you don't say anything, then they're not going to see it, right? Yeah. And I get guys calling me, telling me, even after the fact, hey, man, thanks, I appreciate it. Like, I didn't see it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they changed it. It wasn't that the guy was a bad guy, but he was just so full of
We all have blind spots.
We all got blind spots, right? And the problem is if you don't let guys know, right, especially when you're in a leadership position, hey, this is your blind spot.
Right.
You can't fix it if you don't have any self-awareness or you're not self-aware. Even when you do. Even I'm self-aware, I still have blind spots.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? We all do, you know?
That's right.
So
I'd like to hit on that point a lot for all the men listening. That's brotherhood.
Yeah.
That is the power of brotherhood. And you don't have to be warriors. You don't have to be professional soldiers to have a brotherhood. You need to go find guys that will tell you straight, like you forced to happen from a position as a leader, because it's not polite. It's not actually kind to let a guy keep deceiving himself.
Yeah.
And there has to be a level of trust, obviously. Yeah. You got to know each other and have some relationship built. But when that is built, it's your obligation now as a fellow man to look at your brother and be like, hey, bro, you're wrong. This needs to change. And sometimes it's gentle. It's not always like hammering over the head. But I think we've grown up in this world now where men are terrified to do that. And we wonder why we're disconnected, suffering all the time, and so confused, and we don't know how to lead. And it's like, because you're not getting any feedback. Yeah. And the most effective feedback, I feel like, is from another man that you respect, because it kind of cuts through all the extra stuff that doesn't matter. Yeah. And you're like, ooh, maybe I do need to think about that.
So the thing about it is I think a lot of times where people avoid it is a couple different reasons. One is if I go to you and I give you, even in the best way, a correction, I know if you don't receive it well, that could hinder our relationship.
Sure.
Right? So that's cowardice.
Yeah, there's a risk.
To me, I think that's cowardice, right?
I would agree.
Because the reality of it is if you are my brother or you are my friend or you are my peers, whatever, and I care about you, I am not going to let you fail. Now, at the end of the day, that still has to come with some wisdom and some knowledge.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, because we're not going around like a hammer looking for a
exactly,
nail.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and then you have to understand who you're talking to and what their biases are and how do I approach this with them where it's going to be effective to where they're going to receive it also, right?
That's right.
Because if I just tell you and you're not going to receive it, right? Because, I mean, you've had that, and in leadership positions, I've had personnel that I've told things to, right, that actually outranked me, that I knew who I could talk to and who I could just be talking to the wall.
Right.
Right. And once I figured out I'm just talking to the wall and you're not receiving it, then you're just wasting my time.
Exactly.
Right. So, like, I'm not going to tell you anymore. Right.
Yeah.
So, but then there's other personnel that you can say that will take it in and receive it and be like, okay, hey, listen, right. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. You know.
And we were talking about this last night. Like, it's a sign of a pretty strong man. And it's strong, I use kind of catch-all. Physically, mentally, emotionally, a very complete man. A very good sign of that is the guy who goes and asks for, like, people to poke holes in his brain.
Oh, yeah.
You know, hey, man, I think I'm doing pretty good at this, but what do you really think? Like, tell it to me straight. You know, like, nah, dude, that thing sucked. You need to fix this, and this. Okay, thank you. But, you know, and it hurts a little sometimes because, like, man, I put all this effort into it or whatever, but it's like, you're not going to get better if you just try and be like, oh, it was perfect.
Yeah. So some of the kindest guys, well, not all of them, but a lot of the guys that are nice, at least in SF that I've seen in leadership positions, are some of the biggest snakes. Because
nice to your face, not yeah,
exactly. Because they're afraid of confrontation. The same guys that I have that are in my friend circles that are considered assholes are the ones that I can call and is like, has got my back on the drop of the dime.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're not afraid to come in there and say, hey, listen, man, like, to give you some corrections or to like, hey, listen, like, help you out, right? Yeah. Sometimes that comes off blunt. Sometimes that comes off as like maybe not having any empathy, but majority of the time it's coming from more love than what somebody's receiving.
Exactly.
Like they don't understand it.
Yeah.
Now the guy that when you sit there and has zero feedback for you, right? So if I go to somebody and I say, hey, I just did this operation or I did this or this, and you have zero feedback from me, it doesn't matter what it is, right?
Yep.
Two things. Either you're a coward or you have zero knowledge and wisdom to make any corrections.
Right.
So to me, you're not of any value to me.
Yep.
Because you don't either know anything to give me enough feedback on it, which I see a lot in leadership roles, right? And then, or you don't have the way to give feedback because you don't want to be confrontational.
Yeah.
Right? Now, and obviously, there's certain times when emotions are high that you don't necessarily want to give a correction at that time. There's a time
we don't want to add fuel to the fire.
Exactly,
certainly.
Right? So there's times where like you're going to give those corrections or whatever in there, but...
And again, the sign of a good, complete man is, I think we've been conditioned to believe that conflict means that there's hatred.
Yeah.
Which is not the case. In fact, now in my life, I'm at a point where I'm surrounded by hordes of men that I respect immensely, and hardly any of them were professional warriors. You know what I mean? They're from all walks of life, and we spar all the time mentally about values, about how we raise our families. And there's a lot of agreement too, of course. You have to have shared values and things, but we don't always see eye to eye, and it's not like we're fighting, but because they poke at me a little bit, I have to reflect on, well, am I right about how I think this? Yeah. And if there's a misalignment, then it helps me see it.
Yeah.
But men, from man to man, in a context of a professional brotherhood or a supportive brother, any group that men need to have, you can't do this alone. That dynamic of a little bit of conflict is very healthy. It's not, there's not hatred. There's a difference between me arguing with you because I just don't like you versus, okay, we really feel passionately about this thing and we're trying to both learn a better way. You know what I mean? And if you're afraid of conflict as a man between brothers, I can guarantee that you're afraid of conflict with your wife. And so now what are you allowing to happen in the context of your marriage and in your home, right? And so that's why men, you need to be comfortable with some conflict. You have to hold standards. It's our job to enforce standards and to do it out of love, because we realize that temporary emotions of someone feeling hurt because they got corrected is actually long-term healing for them. And that's empathy and love and compassion. And so I think we've been led astray today. And I know that you had to do this with very masculine, alpha type go-getters. But I think that's a very universal skill that all men need to incorporate on a pretty much daily basis.
Yes, yeah, I think so. There's two sides of that coin there too, and you have to align yourself somewhere in the middle of it. I think originally, early on in my career, that was my way to show I cared about you, is
very
making
authoritative.
Not just authoritative. I understand the human domain, so I knew kind of how to approach people on it, right? And depending on what leverage that I had, right? Yeah. So, as a sergeant major or first sergeant or a team sergeant, if I'm working with, my counterpart or whatever, right? I know, sometimes we talk about intent versus reality. Yeah. Like, hey, this is what I want to do, right? Commander might say, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Right. Okay, well, that's great. How do you want to do that? I want to enforce this policy. Okay, well, this is how this policy is actually going to play out. Yeah. This is your intent. This is the reality of what's going to happen on the ground. That does not meet your end state. Right. Oh, then he goes, oh, shit, you're right, it doesn't. Yeah. Okay, so now let's relook at what you're talking about. How about we do X, Y, and Z? Mm-hmm. Right? That's how you influence, and that's how you lead. That's right. Right? Not, hey, that is the stupidest thing I ever heard. Exactly. That's not going to meet your intent, because now that guy's on the defensive. That's right. And now, you're not having any leverage. You're not even bringing any wisdom. You're not bringing any knowledge. You're not trying to solve a problem. You're just trying to say that problem sucks, right? That's how you have to do with especially type A personalities, right?
Yep.
Like, so at the end of the day, and that's how you influence, and that's how you lead, and you can be a leader, the third, fourth, fifth guy
That's
on
right.
the totem pole.
I preach this constantly in Elite Sentinel training, is that your title is irrelevant. A good man can provide leadership skills in any situation, even if you're the lowest guy in the group. The calm suggestion, you can bottom up refine any situation and help maybe a struggling leader become a good leader simply from bottom up refining, right? You can affect culture even without the title, right? It's harder, but I think it's our responsibility. I think that's the problem today too, is so many men are like, well, I don't have the title, it's not my problem. Nice. How courageous of you, right? To not step up and try and help all of your team members, whatever your team is, to be better.
Yeah.
And then let's extrapolate that to like family leadership. If you don't have the guts to do it with people that you really don't know that great, or it's very superficial, what are you allowed to go on in your own home? Yeah. And that's why this stuff, it translates, and it's like a muscle. You have to practice it and build it and train it. Yeah. And when men don't, you're setting yourself up and your family for failure. And so, really good points, very valuable lessons on leadership from someone who's done quite a bit of it.
Yeah. And then the thing about it, for me, it's like learning how to apply a lot of that stuff into the civilian lifestyle. And a lot of it's applicable. Yeah. Like, I've done a lot of this stuff, and you can apply it to a lot of civilian lifestyle. You know what I mean?
I'm figuring it out now, but I definitely didn't when I first left active duty.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, that was my Army bucket. Now I've got to have a new bucket. No. It's like, no, man, there's a lot of crossover. You just got to apply it differently.
All you have to do is apply. Man, I'm telling you right now, the leadership and the experience and the wisdom that I gained from being a Green Beret, like, I can apply that to almost any career field and be successful. Right now, there's going to be some changes in there. There's going to be a learning curve on the processes and the systems or whatever. Yeah. But the process and the systems that work are the process and systems that work. You're just using it in a different format, right? And you're just learning exactly something different.
And the character traits of leadership is all
universal. Is all the same. It's all universal, Yep. But I think at times, for me personally, it's like taking that leadership trait and applying it to your household. Mm-hmm. That's the hardest leadership position I've ever held.
It is, yeah.
And I've led men in combat. I was a first sergeant over 1st Special Forces Command, a company sergeant major. The hardest leadership challenge I've ever had was leading my family.
It's the most important.
And that's the most important.
There's the most at stake.
Right? So, like, that's where I think guys, kind of miss the mark on things. They're like, they neglect that a little bit, way too much, and then, or not know how to do it, right? Because
I think that's actually the majority of it. Is I think we're not trained or taught properly anymore how to do family leadership as men.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a really great little. I wanted to get that out of kind of your military experience, but I do want to kind of tie the loop on your story a little bit before we continue to have more open discussion on that. I know at some point things started catching up with you. And I know you really started to struggle. Yep. So if you're willing to be courageously transparent with us on some of that, I think that'll be very helpful for men to understand that, like, look, everyone has a fight. Everyone has something in their past that was a challenge.
Oh, yeah.
And what we do with it is what matters. So
I'd
love to kind of do that.
So, I mean, that's the thing about it is like people look at, like, things as like, man, failure is one step closer to success, And if you have had success without any trials and tribulations, how do I know you're going to be successful when you get punched in the face?
That's right.
Right? That's why I always love the fighters, like, like the Forrest Griffins, like the guys that just got their teeth, like, knocked in before they started fighting. Like, those are the guys that, like, really look, because I'm like, man, if you're winning all the time, that's great. Mm-hmm. And
until you're not.
Until you're not, right? I want to see the guy, how he reacts whenever he's getting the shit kicked out of him. Like, that's the guy I want to see, right? Yeah. Because life is great when life is great. But how do you react when your back's against the wall? That's right. And somebody's got their knee on your throat? Mm-hmm. How are you going to react then? Like, that's the guys I want to surround myself with. That's right. Going back to the deployments, we had some pretty tough deployments. I kind of, put on that face and that persona.
The brave face of...
Yeah, the brave face. Hey, it's good. Kept on the warrior mindset. You know what I mean? And it's like, hey, this is just a part of life, Yeah.
But you had lost friends, and you had seen what happens to their family and your family.
And then, but like you're like part of it, you kind of put it like, hey, this is just a way of life, right?
Yeah.
So, very hardened, I would say, very, very hardened. You know?
To kind of just protect yourself, you feel like?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think it was protecting myself and then maybe losing some perspective. I think a little bit, you know,
being a little bit jaded or something, or
I wasn't jaded. I don't think I was jaded, like because I still enjoyed and loved what I did.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? I love being a Green Beret. I love like being in here doing what I did.
Yeah.
But part of it is I think when you harden your heart and you kind of keep that warrior mindset, it is you're doing that to protect others, and like you have to be hard to do a job that you're supposed to be doing. Like you have to be able to have that, you know, that mindset, you know. The problem is letting that down when you get back. Like, how do you do that?
Right.
That's the hardest thing. Okay. Yeah. When I'm in combat, right? I need to be in a certain mindset, a certain frame of mind. You know what I mean? My team comes before anybody and everything. Right. But whenever I get back, how do I change that? How do I come back into the loving, caring husband that I should be?
Yeah.
Or am I going to still be the hardened warrior, who, you know you do what I say because I tell you to do it kind of father, right? Or are you going to come back and be loving and compassionate? It's very tough, right? And it took me a long time to figure it out, and I still struggle with it. You know what I mean? So that's, I think, is very tough, right? So then from there, I think for me, my time started. So the SF guys, for me, my leadership, I progressed throughout my career, right? And I think a lot of times when guys are progressing, they can still stay actively, like, moving forward, right? Like, versus the guy who may be an E7 and doesn't make it to a team sergeant. You see those guys fall off and go to a depression, usually get fat, like have issues before retirement, right? Because now they're not on the team anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you see, that's a recurring thing in that
They
stuff.
lose their identity now.
They lose in their identity because they're not in a team anymore, right? And then, like, all the guys that I've seen that's been overweight in SF, right? Overweight, drink too much or whatever, there's all kinds of there's other issues that they're dealing with. It's either some family issues, trauma, like TBI, PTSD. There's all kinds of things that are going with, right? You can see all the red flags. You know what I mean? A lot of that time, it's like as they're coming out of the team, right? For a lot of guys that are still progressing forward, it usually doesn't happen until retirement. Right. Because in the day, I got the next.
Sure. Yeah. You're still getting kind of like your dopamine hit almost.
Yes.
Of
I got
achieving.
my next. Yeah. Exactly. Right. But like, nobody wants to be on an ODA and they get moved to an S shop and be like, okay, that's fine. I can do it for a year if you can get back on the team.
Just to define for people who may not know, like the ODA is the core fighting unit of special forces, and then there's all these other roles, staff, and they have to exist, but they're not. They're not the ones where it's the most fun or the most glorified, right? You're kind of in the rear with the gear type of stuff. And the big army has similar structures too, but it's So anyone who works as hard as guys like you to become a Green Beret, the pinnacle of life is on a team.
Yeah,
there's just no experience that can compare. Yeah. So it's a very hard thing for anyone to let go of. I just want to make that clear for people who may not understand the structure.
I try to be good with my military jargon. Sometimes if I forget, So,
well, you did just retire a whole, less than 2 months ago. So I think we can give you a little bit of a break on it. But
so for me, I still progressed, right? And then went and did my team sergeant time. Then went over there and was a first sergeant. So I'm still moving. Came back and became a company sergeant major. And as soon as I took over, right when I took over, this was in 2020. Right, like COVID was like just happening.
Okay.
Right, and they were still trying to figure out like
what's going to happen.
Right, and then I get a phone call. My son was in a motorcycle accident, and then man, I was just like at that point, like something was, you know what I mean? Like I knew.
You knew.
Like at that point, man, my stomach just dropped, and so from there, I don't know if I'm ready to talk about all the details on that, but I mean, it was, I tell my wife, it was, my son ended up passing away, right? So it was the most, obviously, the difficult thing that I've ever had to deal with, that we've ever had to deal with in our life, and it was painful, And then from there, it was just like a downward spiral.
Okay.
You know, for me, my wife, my kids, it was very tough. You know, so at first they didn't know if we were going to be able to have. I didn't know even if we were going to have a funeral because it was COVID, and I had like funeral homes were like, oh, we don't want all these people here, right? And then so we went to another funeral home, and we're like, hey, listen, like he was like kind of back and forth. I'm like, listen, like I'll give you double. Like I don't care. Like I want to have some kind of service, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so we ended up. This is like right before the craziness. It was just kind of starting, right? And then we moved forward with the funeral processions. So, but we were, man, me and my wife, I think, like obviously there's nothing set up, so we're doing all the planning for this, you know. And then we only stayed out of work. I don't even think a week. And me and my wife were both back at work.
Oh, really? Wow.
And I'm like, I didn't know what to do, man. You know what I mean? And that's the one thing about like when you harden yourself, like you don't know how to grieve.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, so you're holding all this shit in, you know, because like there's a next deployment and then they're like this. So you learn how to deal with death and you learn how to deal with killing and you learn how to deal with all these things, you know, because that's just part of the lifestyle. It's a part of what, what you've signed up for, you know. And then like a tragedy like that happens and you're like, now what do I do? You know? And then, so we went back to work and we just ignored it.
Really?
Yeah. And it was like everything just started kind of unraveling. You know what I mean? Like I started, I went away from like the PT, like all, you're going through this grieving process and you don't know how to do it. Right. Yeah. So for 20 plus years, even as a childhood, I've learned how to like ignore trauma,
stuff it down,
right? Because that's what a man does. You just stuff it down, put it aside, you carry on, and you move forward, right? Draw fire, move forward, right? And then like now you're like, now what do I do, right? Where do I go from here? So I mean, at that point, we just went to pretty very dark place, you know. I never really. As far as drinking goes, there was times in my career where I drank more than what I probably should. Yeah. But it was usually socially or whatever.
I got you.
You know what I mean? Yeah. But I had never really had a problem as far as I was always able to take my obsession and addictive personality to apply it towards things that were
productive,
right?
Like the gym and stuff.
Like all the other stuff that for success. Like there's not too much. I don't think there's too much, as me personally, there's not too much difference between sometimes an addict and somebody who's ultra successful.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just how it's channeled.
It's how things are channeled, right?
Certainly.
If you can take this obsession that you have, right? Now, once it starts controlling your mind, that's a little different, right?
Yeah. There has to be healthy boundaries about it.
Right? So, but if you're obsessed off of one thing that's bad for you, you can be obsessed about something that's good for you.
Sure.
Right?
Which is actually most addiction therapy has you replace
exactly,
with something because it's you can't just go cold turkey.
You can't just go cold turkey on that stuff.
It's virtually impossible.
Yeah. So for
but you had stopped basically. Now you started shying away from the things that were productive at this point, or
oh yeah, I mean at that point because you're like total grief, man, total depression.
So you were just
like I had a hard time just getting out of bed.
Okay,
like you know what I mean. Like it was at that point where and then at that point I'm a company sergeant major.
So you feel like you got to keep appearances up.
Bro, like I have to, you know what I mean? So I'm like showing up, kind of going through the motion, trying to be the best leader that I could in the shell of a man that I was. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like, and now my perspective on things are changing, you know what I mean?
Right.
And trying to figure out, man, where do I go from here?
Right.
You know? Because your purpose is not the same anymore, right?
And it was your oldest son?
Yeah, it was my oldest son.
Okay. So your firstborn of 4.
Yep. Yeah. So
I'm really sorry, man.
Yeah, it was very tough. And I would say, it was a 3-year downhill spiral, I guess, probably, we're trying to manage it as much as possible, And then
so So you like stop working out as much and
man, I pretty much stopped working out altogether.
okay.
I barely.
And you were drinking too much and just
just started drinking.
Okay.
You know, drinking to kind of get by, drinking to sleep, drinking to like have a bad
so
day.
it really became a problem. Okay.
I would say it became not a huge problem, but it was enough to where like it still was not a healthy life. It's not a healthy life. It's not healthy, you know?
Right.
So, but yeah, so like that was my biggest thing. And then, you know, it's the problem with that when the hardest thing is whenever you're grieving like that and you're both grieving, your wife's grieving. How do you come together when you're both grieving? Like you both need support.
Right. Yeah.
Like you're there kind of be the bigger person to help her.
Right.
And you're struggling, so you're trying to put up this, you know, trying to be fake strong,
right,
to help her, right? You know what I mean? And but I'm not doing the things that I need to be doing as a man, to get past this myself, right? You know? So,
well, and statistically, I mean, most marriages that have a child pass away end in divorce. It's like 80+% or something. It's very high.
So I'm going to tell you right now, you know, this is why I said is. Statistically, me and my wife been married for 24 years, right? Statistically, we should
impossible.
not. We have 0.1% chance that we should be still married.
Right.
You know, we are married because there's no person in. I know, like I said, I know she's been through trials and tribulations. I know the worst version of her, and I still love her. She knows the worst version of me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
I know that there's going to be tough times, but there's no one I know out of any person like we have each other's back. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I will never find that again.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so to me personally, it's worth her being at her worst point and me helping her through that than me quitting and choosing not to still love her. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, so like for us, for me, you know, I had to like, okay, I got to rebuild.
Yeah.
You know, and then for me, I went into what I knew, and that was fitness, man.
Okay.
You know, because even as a GB, like I was very much into like Team PT. I was very much focused on that.
Yeah.
Because I think for me as a man or even in the military, that's probably the simplest thing that you can do.
I agree. It's instant credibility.
It's not just instant credibility. Is you don't have to be smart, right?
It is simple.
It's very simple. You can be a meathead.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And just put one foot in front of the other, just lift the weights. You know what I mean? And then you can at least be physically fit.
Right.
Now we can work on, you know, your education, wisdom, all the other stuff, right? But like that's probably the easiest thing that you can do, right? And people neglect it the most, you know? So, So you
got back in the gym.
Back in the gym, you know. Before SF, like while I was in SF, you know, I was very performance based.
Okay.
You know, so I ate healthy. I would say 50% of the time.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, maybe 75% of the time. You know.
Okay.
That's kind of given some like good numbers, you know. But yeah, then I got out and I got back to the gym and then I just went all in, just kind of went whole healthy foods, started trying to get rid of some of this medication that I was like taking.
Well, that's like just the last couple months, or
that was probably about 2 years, about a year and a half ago, I think.
Okay, did you have so I guess just help me understand because you officially retired recently, but you were like off.
No, so I officially retired right at the end of April. I did my retirement ceremony June 1st.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, but like during my
there's a long like getting out process.
Yeah, there's a long
so you're
getting out
basically
process. And I'm getting out or whatever, and I'm still, and that's where I started kind of my rebuilding.
Okay.
Right. It was probably about a year and a half.
Do you think that because you were like, okay, it's time to retire, that was kind of the spark that was like, all right, I got to make some changes because this ain't working?
So for me,
or was it something else?
So for me, it wasn't. So the retirement was just the catalyst of everything explosion, right? So So
that was actually the thing that made it worse initially.
Yes, right? Because at the end of the day, right, you know, we lost our son. I go back to work, and I am just staying above water because now I'm in a position where guys count on me. Yeah. Right? And I'm like, I have to stay above water.
You got to keep knuckling in.
I got to keep knuckling in and, like, just making it through, right?
Okay.
Once you identify your purpose with this, and then that stops, and reality hits in, right? okay, I have nothing to keep me from just being above water anymore.
Yeah.
Now, everything that I'm dealing with, I have to deal with myself. I can't hide behind some job. I can't hide behind some
You were forced to
bullshit.
confront.
This is what success looks like or whatever. You're forced to confront any and everything that you're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
And then at that point, there's a lot of feelings, bitterness. Like I was pretty salty for a little while, right? At the military, at the regiment, like everybody, a lot of anger, frustration.
They've done this to me type of thing.
Well, I don't know just that much, but it's just or the military's done a lot. The regiment, without the regiment,
it was just an easy target.
It was just an easy target at that point. Yeah, I think for me,
it was an easy punching bag.
It was just a punching bag that like I had to release somewhere, so I'm pointing fingers at somebody, right? So
gotcha.
Because I'm grateful for everything that I did. The opportunities and everything else for it,
So how did you and your wife finally start to come through this together? Because again, statistically, it's losing a child plus multiple combat tours. Like statistically, it's like impossible.
Yeah. So as a man, as a family, I think the man has to. If there's an issue, the man has to correct first.
Mm-hmm.
Or if he doesn't correct and his wife corrects first, he better correct past.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And
like, right. Yeah.
Right? If she starts getting herself out of there, then you need to be, you know what I mean? So for me, I was development, not for me specifically. I had to fix myself to fix my family.
Right.
Right? Like people look at development as like, oh, this is for me.
Mm-hmm.
Man, development, in my opinion, is to serve.
Yeah. Yeah, you're building yourself up to a point so you have more to give.
Yes, right. I can handle more stress.
Your capacity.
I can give more, right? If I'm successful, then everybody that's in my circle can be successful.
Right.
Right? Like, so at the end of the day, like to me, it's like I'm developing to – I cannot help someone else if my glass is empty.
Right.
There's nothing to give, right?
That's right.
So, like, I had to fix myself, right?
Okay.
So that's kind of where my journey started, right? And then so got back in the gym, went with fitness, started eating healthy again,
Did you have any other, like, therapy or anything? Like, what?
So, yep. I did the, like, personal therapy, like myself.
Right.
Right.
Like talk therapy.
Talk therapy kind of thing. We did marriage counseling.
Okay.
Right. Went to marriage counseling from there. And then I talked to my wife. I'm like, hey, listen, I want you to go to counseling as an individual also.
Okay.
Right, to kind of deal with
right.
talk therapy through your stuff also.
Basically to process the grief. Was that the main focus?
Yes, I think process the grief. But to me, there's like therapy can be used, and this is my personal opinion. Obviously, I'm not a therapist or anything. When you go if you're going to go to a therapist, like to me, I think you go and you talk about positive stuff.
Yeah.
If you go and then you focus on negative shit, you're going to come out with negative. Like there may be a time where you have to like, okay, I got to get through some shit that I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like a lot of people that are going to these therapists, and they're just like, woe is me, I'm a victim.
Yeah.
You're not fixing yourself, man.
It's mind control.
It's mind control.
Everything is mind control.
Everything's mind control. Like you have to have gratitude through the worst experience that you ever had in your life, or you're never going to be able to get out of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to like push, or you're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now there may be a time where you're like, you may fall in that trap, right? But you got to get yourself out of it.
Right.
And you choose to do that, right? Because so I may have been bitter, upset, or whatever for a certain amount of time.
But you've released it.
But hey, listen, man, like I made these choices to do this. I volunteered to deploy.
Right.
I signed the paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
I did this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can't make decisions in life and then just blame somebody else about it.
That's right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what people do. Like, you know what I mean? It's like...
Because it's easy.
Because it's easy, right? Oh, now that they don't care about me anymore and I'm now no longer... Bro, like, we're all in the military. We all know it stops.
Yeah. And it's a big machine. It's
It's
got
a
to
big
keep
machine
moving.
if you keep on going.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, so the reality of it is, no matter what it is, I don't care what career field you're in.
Yeah.
It's going to stop, right?
It will.
It will. So... So that's where I started, like, really kind of, looking at rebuilding myself,
right.
And then, but I started rebuilding myself, and I'm feeling, I still have that anger.
Okay.
Right? And that bitterness. I still have not, now I'm in shape, I'm eating healthy.
Right.
Right? And I'm going to, doing all this stuff, and my marriage is still not complete, man. You know what I mean? And I'm like, what up? Like,
You just felt like there was a big gap between you?
Yes,
or?
there's a gap
Okay.
between us, but the biggest gap was me releasing my anger and frustration, and still like.
Okay, so you were like having outbursts.
I was having outbursts. I just was not at peace.
Okay.
I had zero peace,
okay.
right?
And so your wife can sense it, certainly.
Yeah, like so.
then
Yeah, she can sense it. Like the guy that driving. I always joke with Bill Burr says it like best. He's like I'm always at an 8. Right?
Oh,
so like
yeah,
you know what
yeah,
I mean? And like you go
just
from an 8
anything
to
will set him
anything
off.
just
so
sets
she's
me
walking
off.
on eggshells.
Yeah, she's
your
walking
kids
on
are
eggshell. Like
eggshell.
I'm driving, somebody cuts me off, man, and I'm ready to like flip, like lose my mind, right? And like that's not the way to live.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like that's not. You can't control your emotions. That's truthfully that's a weak man, right?
Yeah.
So
we were talking about that. It's basically teenager behavior.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I got to figure this out, man. I got to, like, this is not the way to live, like, So it's when I went to my son was going to the gym with me, and then I'm like, all right, hey, listen, let's find some. I want to start going to church.
Okay.
Let's find a church to go to, And then at this point, like I was a Christian. I was never afraid to say I was a Christian.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I was like 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
Got lukewarm, kind of like
I was a lukewarm
Christian.
Yeah, exactly.
Christmas and Easter. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like so, like, but I wasn't trying to like, still a lot of sin, like nothing. I wasn't trying to live, a life with God, right? So, I'm like, all right, let's start going to church, and we started trying to figure out, churches to go to, and at that point, I was very like judgmental.
About like the preacher or the people?
Anything, man.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Anything. You go to a church and I'm like, you're wearing...
You were focused on all the flaws.
I focused on all the flaws.
Right, okay.
Like, why you wearing an expensive watch? You're the preacher. Why you do... You know what I mean? Like, anything that was wrong, like, that's what I'm focusing on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and I'm stopping and I'm like, man, this is not what it's about. It's not about that. Like,
right.
Because the church is made of humans.
Yeah.
You're not going to find a church that is not with some sort of sin, right? But it's easy to judge when you're on the outside on somebody else, right? So, I had to get over that, right?
Okay.
And then we went to a bunch of different churches. We found a church that we really enjoyed. My daughter started coming with us, my oldest daughter. And then my wife started coming with us, right? Got introduced to small groups where men get together and, read scripture, going over that. And I think that really, truthfully, church was good, but it wasn't until doing life with other men that are in line with the same faith as you and that are trying to live a better life is till where I was like, okay. You know what I mean? And
it's true brotherhood.
Yes.
And it's not like I've said this before, and obviously I did not experience it to the degree you did, right?
Yeah.
Like the ODA team is a very special thing that's built, right? Most of the big army doesn't get to that level, doesn't get to experience it but even that is still, it almost lacks a bigger purpose in a way. Yeah. Because like you said, you're going to hang that hat up one day. Whereas like these other guys, it's day to day. This is like how to be a better husband, how to be a better father. Like that's not going away. That's your job forever, And so I don't want to discredit the military. There's a lot of amazing things about the military, but I think most men today believe like, oh, well, because I don't have that, I can't have a brotherhood. It's nonsense. Yeah. Like every single one of us needs at least a few guys. Like there is no such thing as a successful lone wolf. It doesn't exist. All the dudes I look up to, I'm like, I want to be like that guy. They're surrounded by amazing people of all shapes and sizes. Yeah. And most of them are men. And they give it because it's the whole iron sharpens iron thing. But so I'm glad you found that. And I would imagine it took a lot of humility too, because you were probably like, well, look, I'm Mr. Green Beret and stuff. Was there a little bit of that hubris initially at first?
So initially there's a couple different things for me, like giving my life up to like Christ or to it is most for me, and I think a lot of SF guys too, it's control, right?
You want to be in control?
Yeah. So like so what the problem is like so it feels uncomfortable to give Christ control and say, all right, I'm going to give you control, right? And I don't know what that looks like. It's a very scary thing, right? But after I went all in and I'm like, listen, like this is, if you can give me peace, man, that's the thing I'm missing, And it's tough, man.
Yeah.
But that's what, I mean, then you start reading scripture and you get in these small groups and you start looking at implementing it in your life, and you're like, oh, that fixed that portion of my life.
Right.
Oh, and everything starts like your family structure starts coming in line.
Yep.
You know what I mean? As far as like the love, the peace, the empathy, like all those things that you're looking, you know what I mean? Like it starts fixing itself on its own.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, man, there's got to be something more to this than what, than maybe I originally thought. You know?
And I've experienced that exact same process in my life. The more that I finally, because I was a control freak, I was a controller. I'm an Army officer. That's what we do. When I finally really laid it down, because I was the same way. Kind of, I talked like one, I acted like one, but I wasn't really following.
Yeah.
The more I've done that, it's amazing how much simpler my life has gotten.
Yes.
There's still plenty of challenge. I'm not spared from the hardships of life because I follow Jesus. But my inner turmoil is almost non-existent because he takes it from me.
Yeah.
Right? And I know now that like by continuing to be faithful in that, engaging with other men who are also pursuing that, a lot of these things I used to worry about are just stripped from me because it's really hard to pinpoint. It's really hard to put into words, but it's very liberating. Ironically, by not being in control, I'm more liberated. So it's kind of the paradox of the whole thing, right? And
it is, and it's uncomfortable at first for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's scary.
It is scary. It's a scary thing at first, And then so like the small groups, I think it's really what helped me, like getting around men, and sometimes like, and you have to drop that ego too, right?
Yeah,
because you're like, I do come from a lot of experience and a lot of background in that, So when I initially went, I just kind of just sat back and listened, because I didn't want to overwhelm people with my story,
right?
Because sometimes that could be maybe intimidating. I'm already like a big guy, tattoos, and I'm telling, you know what I mean? And like, so I don't want to like come off like overwhelming,
right?
And then like, so it took me a little bit to kind of really open up on my testimony, I think a little bit, And
did you have any fear of like rejection or anything, or?
So, not really.
Okay.
I think I learned that portion like in being the type of leader that I was. Like I said, I wasn't afraid of confrontation, so I went from two spectrums. I went from one, not giving two shits what anybody thought about me, which I think is can be toxic.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, certainly.
Right? It can be toxic, right?
Yeah.
And then now I don't care what people think about me except the ones that I know, like, are good people. Like, correct. I want the people that I love, I want to honor them. I want to be, like, to a point where, like, hey, he's doing the right thing, right? Not just, I don't care. I don't care what you think, right? Because if you don't care what somebody thinks, that's not good either, right? Because I do care what my wife thinks. I do care what my kids think. I do care what my brothers think. You know what I mean? Like, there's still an accountability there. Yeah. So, there's two sides to that. But, like, the reality of it is you can't go around and be concerned. If you're not in my circle who knows who I am, then I don't care what you think. Right. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Well, and even with your wife, there's still a degree of, like, some points where you care about the fact that she's not happy with whatever the thing is, but you still have to make the hard decision that goes against what she wants because it's actually better for the family.
But that's where you're having at.
But it has you have to be from that position first to actually have the awareness of what others' mothers and desires are. But, otherwise, you're a tyrant.
Yeah, but I do care what she thinks. That's why I'm saying no. Because even though sometimes, like, at the end of the day, like, being a leader and a father or whatever, just because my kid wants to come up and eat Pop-Tarts every day for breakfast, I'm not going to give her that because I care about her. Like, she may want that, but I'm going to say, no, you're not having Pop-Tarts for breakfast anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to eat these foods. You're going to do this. Like, you know what I mean? You're not getting ice cream at 8 a.m. because you want it. Right. You know what I mean? Not. Like, so I do care about you. That's why I'm telling you no. Okay. You know what I mean? Yeah. So
have you now that you've kind of like healed a lot, you've processed a lot since losing your son, and now you're out of the military. Like, have you been able to? I imagine there was also a separation between your kids too, in terms of while you were in the midst of the grief, right? And so have you been able to kind of work through that and now help them kind of work through it too?
Yes. So
what's that look like?
So that has been, throughout, I guess, my career, I've been gone a lot. So my thing about it as a father and like as a husband, I was like, listen, my biggest goal was to make my kids good members of society.
Yeah.
Like that was kind of like what I thought, right? I was more of the rock than I was fluid and be able to kind of move through stuff.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
Like I learned from that as I got older. Like I was too much rock and not enough fluid.
Right.
Okay. So,
meaning like you were too rigid all the time.
I was very rigid a lot, right? And then so I had to like learn to there's a time and a place for it.
Sure.
But it still has to be from love.
Yep.
Right. And you have to, even though that you're doing it out of love, a lot of times I had a hard time showing them I'm doing it out of love.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? There's a difference.
Definitely.
No, you can't do it, and you're doing it out of love.
Yeah.
No, you can't have that ice cream at 8 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
No, you can't have that ice cream at 8 a.m. in the morning. This is the reason why. Come here and give me a hug.
Right.
That's the way I should have been doing it.
There's 3 legs of leadership. It's authority, responsibility, and compassion. So authority is like you have the power to change the outcomes. Responsibility is you're responsible for the outcomes. You don't pass blame. And compassion is your people know that you love them or you love them a lot and they know it.
Yes, they have to know it.
Yeah.
Even though
that's where a lot of leaders, their authority and responsibility and basically no compassion. That was certainly me.
Yeah. And then you have this like to a point you're doing things out of love, right? But if it's not received, if they don't know that you're doing it out of love, you're missing the point.
Exactly.
Right? So they have to know you're doing it out of love.
Exactly.
And I failed on that a lot.
Okay.
Right?
And so you've gotten a lot better at that over time now.
Yes. And we used to go on like family trips, and I thought at that point, like being together on a family trip was enough, right? Which is good, right? So we always used to, because from deployments, that was one thing like I always did, right? Before I deployed, we went on a family trip and we took family photos.
Gotcha.
Because the reality of it was like, man, I don't know if I'm coming back. I want them to at least remember something of their father.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If something happens, right?
For sure.
And we spent a lot of time together as a family. But after Jacob passed away, I started being more intentional with one-on-one with my kids.
Okay. Very good.
Right?
Yeah.
It's great to do things as a family.
Yep.
Right? But you need to do things with just your son.
That's right.
You need to do things with just your daughter. You need to do things with just your wife. Right?
That's really good.
You have to do those so when you come together as a family,
there's relationship between
everyone. Relationships, right? And then I tell my son and my daughter, I said, listen, I want you to go out with your sister and do something. So I want you to go out with your mom and do something, right? So like even though there's a family unit, right, and I am building a relationship with all of us together, my son should be doing the same thing with his mother.
Yeah, he should be building a web, like a mesh.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Right? And it gets very difficult at times when you just all the life that's going on, right? But the more that I think that you can practice that, even if it's just going out for coffee for 15 minutes and you're sitting down with your daughter, your son, your wife, or whatever, and just having a conversation and just nothing.
Yeah.
Sit there and whatever,
Especially with your daughters, you're modeling what they're going to look for in a man.
Yeah.
And I took it as a huge moment of pride recently. My daughter was like, can we have another daddy-daughter date? And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. She's expecting it and wants it. And I was like, all right, this is good.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I'd like to transition real quickly. We do a couple kind of fatherhood-based questions pretty much with every guest, and I'd love to kind of just walk you through some of those. So the first one is, legacy, big deal as a man, right? And I think it's pretty misunderstood, actually. I think a lot of guys, to your point earlier, it's about career, it's about your name on a building, or for you, like, is your name going to be remembered in the regiment or whatever, which aren't bad things.
Yes.
But normally it's at the expense of family. So what do you think legacy really is, or like should be for men? And then what are you wanting to build with the rest of the time you have?
So my legacy, and this is me, my legacy for my kids, the best thing that I was ever able to help them with is their walk with God. The fact that I was able, we were able as a family to find Christ, that's my legacy. That's the legacy that I hope that my kids now have, that they can instill down to their grandkids and everything else.
That's right.
Like there's nothing else that I can think of that I could say that is going to leave a family structure than that.
I would agree.
Like There's nothing. I can't.
Yeah.
You know, I sit there and I'm like thinking, okay, well, what other things can I? There's nothing. Like everything that I've done, if I could, if I was succeeded or failed at anything else, the fact that my two oldest children, right, who are now both baptized and are very, very much on the walk with God.
Good.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, and they probably do a better job than what I do with it. You know, and they are trying to live as best as they can, right, with the trials and tribulations that they go through, right? Like, to me, that is success in leading the rest of my family to God, right?
Yeah.
Like, to me, there's nothing else that I can say as a legacy, because to me, a legacy it's the wisdom and the knowledge that you give and that you pass on from generation to generation.
Right. Yeah.
Like, that's it. I would rather leave them with that and $0 in the bank than leave them with $100 million.
Yeah. I love that, man.
Yeah.
It's good. All right. The next one is, what's a piece of, because you started pretty early too.
Yeah.
What's a piece of advice if you could travel back in time and give, 18-year, I guess you were 18, right? Young you.
Yeah.
Here's a piece of fatherhood advice I wish I would have had.
Oh, man.
What's that one look like?
Piece of fatherhood advice. I think that would probably, I would have like that. I would have probably, if I could have started off, in faith, like 100% in earlier.
Yeah.
Right. I would say that would probably be where I would have went on. Now, I'm not going to change anything because I'm the man who I am because of what I've went through.
Certainly.
Right. And I probably wouldn't have had the same things,
right.
You know what I mean? Like that happened, but, if just advice for my kids, I would say is just be in their lives earlier,
Yeah.
And give them your time. Like, your time is your most precious resource. And just kind of don't forget what your purpose is, I would say. As 18 years old, I would say that would probably be what I would tell myself.
Yeah.
Is your purpose isn't all these outside things that you're getting distracted with. Mm-hmm. That's not your purpose in life, That is you helping maybe society, that's you helping everything else, but your purpose is way bigger than that,
Right.
And if you want your purpose to be generational, it's got to come in with the family unit,
Gotcha.
So
I think that's good. I like that.
Yeah. So
it's a good answer. All right, final one, and it's basically just when people ask you about being a father, what's like a core memory that really sticks out. But I'd also like to change this one a little bit in your case. Maybe do one for Jacob first, kind of a core memory you have with him that you want to kind of honor his memory with, if you're willing to do that, and then maybe just with your other kids in general. Or maybe it was all of them together.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So I would say, in general, at the birth, I think is always as that father.
Yeah, it's pretty magical.
It's pretty magical, and you're like, man, I got this responsibility now.
It's awesome and terrifying.
Oh, it's like there's so much emotions that you don't even know. Like, you're so happy, you're proud, you're scared, you're like, and depending on where you're at in your life, we were so young.
Yeah,
it was a lot more terrifying than was anything else, And then just trying to okay, what does this look like to be a father?
Right.
Okay, I'm figuring this out from the ground up.
Right.
So I think that is probably, as far as that goes, the biggest memories. I think, because we have so many kids, each individually one. It's kind of
it's a different thing.
Yeah, it's a different thing. With Jacob, man, I think about it a lot with him because obviously he's not here anymore. I think about him all. We think about him all the time, and so one of the core memories, with him is, he was, as a kid, he was just so, I guess, rambunctious. He would just run around in, circles. You know what I mean?
He's the Energizer Bunny.
Just energetic, was running around in circles. He couldn't sit still. He was just, all over the place, as a kid. That's kind of, and then he got older, and the thing about it with him, too, is, he really did not care about materialistic stuff, which was kind of really, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
he was not, I mean, he would buy something or whatever, but it wasn't like he would, like, I'll sell it to get something else or whatever. He did not really care, like, to have things to keep him for, like, a certain, like, you know what I mean? It was very, you know, which most kids aren't like that, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that was, you know, and he, you know, he very much, like, went his own way about stuff. He was very,
chip off the old block there?
yeah, he was very difficult to, at times to, like, he did his own thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had a lot of calls with principals and, like, teachers, and then, you know, trying to.
He's a strong-willed child.
Yeah, very strong. So
that's great, man. Well, I appreciate you being transparent about your past, and you know, obviously, I hate that happened, man.
Yeah.
And but I really appreciate you being willing to share about him and your experience with that, because a lot of people have loss, and especially with your background, I think it really shows that every man, like, we have a challenge, and I think there's this weird culture of, like, almost trying to downplay our own experience, but the tools to solve it, whatever it is, are the same.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of guys are sitting discounting themselves. Well, I should just be able to figure it out. Well, no, you can't, because you're stuck in the midst right now, and, like, you need to listen to what Terry was saying and take action to fix it. So I appreciate you being willing to do that, because I think you have a lot of authority to speak on such things, given your background. Yeah. And I think it helps pierce through a lot of that wrong think about how we as men need to connect and overcome struggles together. So,
yeah, I think a lot, like, you know, you see people talking, and it's all about success, you know, and I'm like, man, that's not life.
No.
Let me tell you something. You're watching somebody online, and they have done nothing but success. They have more shit in their closet that you have no clue what
That's
is.
right.
You know what I mean? Like, so the reality of it is I have learned, you cannot get to success through failure. And if you got to success and you didn't fail, then how are you going to be, like I said, how are you going to react whenever, you know, shit hits the fan? Like, that's where, you know, and I think people are starting to get a little bit more open about, like, that, but, like, lessons learned, you're going to learn more from somebody's, if you can take somebody's failures and apply that on how I can now be successful.
Right.
A lot of times, though, we have to learn through our own failures.
Yep.
Right? Like,
that's true. Yeah.
It's like, because I could tell you a million things, right?
I certainly learned that way.
Right? But, like, at the end of the day, like, you got to learn through your own failures.
Right.
But you get to choose whether you're going to stay down or you're going to keep pushing.
That's
through,
right.
Like,
and it's certainly a lot easier to compress your timeline navigating through those failures if you surround yourself with good men.
Oh, yeah.
Because
100%.
You still got to learn for yourself, but then you're like, hey, did you think about this? Or what about that? And you're like, oh, man, no, I didn't. Yeah. So that's awesome. Yep. Where can people engage with you? Where can they follow you, support you? I know you're just getting started on your journey here.
Yeah,
so
I'm just getting started on this.
Let's do some shameless plug.
Journey, yeah. So
follow Terry right now.
Yeah,
Here's
exactly.
where. Here's where to do it.
So, so after I retired, so I've got just started on the online coaching and mentoring and that. So
fitness stuff, right?
So it's fitness, mindset, leadership, you know, business, you know, that
very good
portion of it, but it's Tactical Edge Coaching Consulting. So I have a couple key speaking events coming up, and then you can follow me on Instagram is the one I originally trying to figure out right now. So so there you can follow me.
All right.
So
links are in the description.
Yep.
Follow him, support him, share his story. I think there's an immense amount of value in you sharing your story and helping other guys realize that, look, man, we've all got crap. And we all struggle. And here's how we can figure it out together. So I really appreciate that. Yeah. Any final thoughts for the audience?
Nah, it's like nope, I think that's That's
okay. Actually, I'm going to close. I got one question for you.
Got?
Your command coin or your challenge coin. It says trailer.
Yep.
Where's that come from?
So an old teammate. So you don't realize how different your life is sometimes whenever you grew up across the tracks, I guess I'd say,
like the way with the rough upbringing.
With the rough upbringing,
you thought that was normal for all kids,
normal, right?
Yeah.
So so when I went into SF, you know, I went through selection and Q course, and guys were talking about different things, and you know, I'm talking about, oh yeah, you know, because I got this. My lip is split. You can't see it from here, but I got in a fight. I think I was maybe 15, 16 years old.
Okay.
And then I was fighting some dude that was like probably 10 years older than me, a grown man, you know. And
smart.
Yeah, exactly, right. So, but like I'm telling like these different stories, you know. I'm like, yeah, we were at the gas station one time, and then we got into it with like 5 different grown men, and it was just me. It was me, my my wife at that time, her mother, her father, and her like grandfather was, and like we got in a huge like gas station brawl.
Dang.
On Valentine's Day in the North End, right? So I'm like telling these stories with, you know, and there was like 3 or 4 guys and one, you know. So anyway, so it was like a huge brawl or whatever there. I'm like telling these different stories, you know, and they're like, oh my gosh, you know. And then one of the team guys there, whenever on our, who was in Fob Rob, gave me that nickname.
Okay, just
trailer, and it stuck the whole time.
Sweet.
And like, so people were like, "Hey, do you know Trailer?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, Terry, yeah." And I'm like, so like, I go to do my first sergeant change of command. The guy that I don't even know is like introducing me as Trailer. You know what I mean? I've never even, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like stuck with me. Like when people like, you know, so. I was like, you know what?
Rolled with it.
I just roll with it.
Wear
you know?
like
This is the thing about it is like you never forget where you come from.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you can push past it, but you know where you come from is where you come from, and that's who you are. And you should, even if it's rough and it's not necessarily a perfect picture, you know, like that's who you are.
Yeah.
You know.
And that's gratitude, right? Like let's close with that. I know you said it, and man, we've had so many people on this show talk about some really hard stuff, and that is a unanimous thing. They've all said is like, if you don't practice gratitude, this will destroy you.
Oh yeah.
And so I just appreciate you reinforcing that, because I think there's not enough of that in our world today.
No.
And
talk about discipline. Gratitude has gotten me further than discipline ever will.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
There's the soundbite right there.
Yeah, that's that one in.
We're gonna clip that one in, Terry. Man, I really appreciate you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm excited to watch your journey just explode and inspire millions of people to be better. So thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
All right, with that, we're going to close, dads. One more time, follow Terry, track his story, help him out. And if you want to get absolutely jacked, he's definitely your man, as well as learn some valuable leadership skills. So with that, let's get climbing that mountain of fatherhood. We will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you're on YouTube, drop a subscription to us. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. It helps greatly. If you are also ready to level up as a man, check out Elite Sentinel Coaching, our program designed specifically for men, where we forge men into leaders. We turn cowards into kings, weaklings into warriors. Become the hero in your story. Join us today.